with these songs, I feel like that it's a little different just because of the fact that we've been playing number one, we've been playing these songs out live in front of people for the longest time. I mean, it was these were the songs that when I started going over to Texas, it was my introduction kind of into the Texas music scene. 22 Days was the first single that I released. The whole original Different Groove album was what was how people knew me basically when I started touring in any kind of normal capacity. And so it was good for me just because number one, it was kind of a walk in the park. Number two, I've been living with these songs for so long that I feel like that there were moments when I could really kind of perfect it to the best of my ability. Like we mentioned earlier, like nothing's correct, but there's right and wrong in what I do. And so like songs like Cars, Trucks, and Me, I feel like that was like the perfect performance. You know what I mean? Like I feel like I nailed it, and it's because of the fact that I've lived with them long enough to where I've been able to really kind of get past the singing it and playing it, and the chords and things like that have become second nature. And so I can remember the times and places and the emotions involved in playing those songs and singing them as well. And so I was really able to put some feel into it that I don't know that I was able to the first time. I mean, I've grown. I've recorded 6, 7 records since then too, and so and that was really kind of my first opportunity in the studio to do a full-length studio album. And so I'm a lot more comfortable now with my voice and with how I sing and what I can do and what I can't do. The only setback, I guess, if there is one, is the fact that there's nerves with the fact that these songs have been, not only have they lived with me this long, they've lived with others this long too. And so I have to sort of allow people the liberty to say, well, I like the old version better, and people have said that, and that's okay, and I don't have a problem with that at all, to be honest with you. Because they're a timestamp, but I really enjoyed it, man. I feel like that we kind of made these songs. I feel like that this is how I heard them when I wrote them, and so I've enjoyed it. Yeah, they kind of. I mean, even though there are a ton of them, I mean, like they all sort of mean something, and every song comes from somewhere and is meant to go somewhere too. I mean, and so, but there are some that are a little bit more memorable than others, and usually the ones that are more memorable are kind of your first ones, I suppose, So that's something to be, to be considered. I think a lot of these songs, like 22 Days is one that meant a lot to me because that was one that I wrote when my oldest daughter was my middle daughter's age. So that's when Ashlyn was 6. And that was, I mean, you kind of write about what you know, and that song was special to me because it was, a song that I wrote sort of about an experience that I had with my child, and those are always special moments. So yeah, I can understand you, like I said, you're kind of a little more fond of some songs than others, just because, in that case, because of who it was written about. And then others, I mean, Shelley is an interesting song just because I kind of make the joke that sometimes really insignificant relationships get significant songs, and that's a little tacky, isn't it? I don't care. Yes, I mean, case in point, 2 songs. Number one was "Never Comes Easy." The other one was "Whole Town Talking." Those were 2 songs that Gordy Quist is the guy that produced the record, and when we were talking about it, I told Gordy, I said, I don't want to record these songs. I don't like them. And he said, well, you're not going to be recording the record if you don't put those songs on there. And I said, okay. I said, we'll do it. And he said, just trust me, I have some ideas. And "Never Comes Easy" was, man, it turned into it. We went into the project as that was my least favorite song in the whole wide world, and it may be one of my favorite songs, especially on the album now, just because of the fact that, it never fails, and this is why you hire producers. This is why you go work with other musicians, and why this is always a collaborative effort, because my perspective on that song was way off compared to what I mean. This is the first time in all these years of recording. This is the first song I've ever recorded. It's got horns in it, and it's like a real cool horn part, and it's real subtle, and it just they heard something in that song that I didn't hear, and were able to just basically, sit down, press record, and play it. And once they started, the band started playing, and I thought, oh, okay, I get it now. So that was a real cool scenario. Whole Town Talking was kind of the same way. I just didn't want it to be. I think initially I wrote that song a little more Steve Earlish, and that was my intention when I wrote it, and it just never, because of the way the song came out, it just never felt that way. And that's a good thing, and I don't think we played it like a Steve Earle song on the record just because it kind of isn't, but it took, because that was in my head, because of the intention initially being in my head like that, that was always how I heard it, and so it was kind of nice to hear it a different way, and to have fresh, objective ears on it, so. Well, in a situation like this with Ella, I've known her since, probably, gosh, she was probably in high school, and so we've known each other a long time, and, she's been pretty familiar with my music. Living in Alabama, I kind of have, I pounded a lot of pavement around Alabama, and so it was a neat thing to be able to ask her to do it because I knew she was familiar with the material, and so because of her familiarity with it, it added to it in the same way that it was. She's lived with this song, of course not as long, but she was familiar with it the same way I kind of was. And so when I asked her to do it, she had an idea of how she wanted to do it. You know what I mean? Where it would, if you just go in cold and you've never heard a song before, it's kind of hard to put a vibe into it, and that was the neat thing about what she did. She was familiar enough with the material to where she walked in and she sang the crap out of it, man. She just, like I said, her harmonies were great. Her ownership of that half of that verse, she just nailed it. Oh man, she's got a ton of it. And the cool thing is about her, yes, she can sing, but she's a great writer. She's a great writer, and I think that there's, I don't think females get the praise they deserve for being the great writers that some of them are. Miranda is a good friend of mine and has had the career she's had because she's a great writer. I think Ella's in the same vein. That Ella knows. She knows what works for her. She knows what a great song is. She knows a great song that may not necessarily be for her. And she just has a charisma on stage, man. I've never seen her look nervous. I've never seen her walk on stage. I've seen her open for Lainey Wilson by herself before, and she just has a confidence that is really admirable, especially for somebody that's, early in her career, in my opinion. I think it feels more mature. I think that there's a sonic depth to it, and like I said, and I've said this in quotes and interviews and stuff that she kind of has this Stevie Nicks vibe to it, and so that really added just a whole different sonic element to it, and so yeah, I think that maturity is a form of completion, yeah. I think everything on this, every song on this record is complete. I think it's that every one of these is kind of in the whole idea of going in and re-recording my first album. I don't think we could have nailed it any closer to a bullseye than we did, to be honest with you. Like I said, these songs really sound like I hoped that they would, and even better, there's just, there's something to be, there's a lot to speak on the mastery of the guys that recorded, that played keys and guitar and bass and drums and stuff. There's some great musicians and great singers on there, and so they lent themselves to these songs, and it really shows. It seems like it was a real collective effort. It didn't take them a lot of let's play it like this instead of like this. We listened to the song, they went in there and they played it and just nailed it. The cool thing is, it's still about life on the road. I can still relate to that, and I could back then. So travel is still a big theme in this record that was and still is, and family. It's funny though. The difference is, and I kind of get a kick out of this a lot. Some of these songs were written for like girlfriends and stuff, and so it's really funny to sing some of these songs and, to have been married for a good 10 years or so. I think it's really neat. I mean, that's kind of the idea of introducing these songs to a new audience is the whole reason that we did this. I mean, this album wasn't available on a couple of platforms, and it was gonna be easier for us to just record it, re-record it, than it would be to try to change all the things that were going to be necessary to change. So this is a kind of a best case scenario. And the cool thing is, after I feel like Bad Days Better kind of went in and sort of established this era in my life, and maybe it's my age and just sort of having done this for the period of time that I've done it. But I feel like with Bad Days Better, I feel like we really kind of poured some concrete on a style. And I feel like I've really, after all these years, have kind of come into my own as far as like what I do, what Adam Hood does. I think Bad Days Better established it. And ironically, we went into a completely different studio in a completely different region with a completely different band, a completely different producer, but still came out with the same stylistic attitude as we did with Bad Days Better. I think if you A/B Bad Days Better and Adam Hood's Different Groove together, I think you can hear some stylistic rootsy similarities that it was not the intention. Which in my opinion, I feel like that's because I think I'm finally hitting stride. It's a good feeling. It really is. It's a good feeling. It's exciting. It's taken a long time, but looking back on it, I mean, I don't know how I could have found this sound in my 30s. There's things that I can explain to people and communications that I have an understanding of now, just musically and in life and the way I sing and just my comfort levels with how I write and how I play and all that stuff. I couldn't have done that 10 years ago. I couldn't have done that 15 years ago. I couldn't have done it 5 years ago, to be honest with you. There's always something in the back of your head that goes, boy, I sure hope everybody likes this, And everybody's not going to like it. And especially when you take liberties like this, you know what I mean? Like, this was the one that's probably the remaking something that is established, that had established me from the get-go. That's a pretty neurotic kind of feel, but you never get used to it. But you sort of learn how to lean into the anxiety a little bit, and Brittany even said, I was stressed out about something who knows what it was, and she made the comment. She said, "Well, this is what we do when we put out records, and this is the feel when we put out records." And so instead of concerning myself with, oh my gosh, I better go ahead and start pulling the covers over my head, you kind of start learning to okay, this is how it's supposed to be. That means it's record time, and those are kind of cues. In the writer's room, those are cues when I pick up my guitar. There's times when I feel more creative than I do at other times, and that's a little bit of a test of, okay, well, maybe it's record time, and so you learn to lean into those things. I realize it when I hear the playback on these albums because, and again, just another testament to the quality of the people that I'm blessed enough to work with. You really have no idea what you do from the inside. From where I sit, I have no idea what it's going to sound like. I think to myself that a song sounds one way, and then you hear it back, and it's like, oh well, man, it didn't sound. This doesn't sound anything like it's a lot more seldom because of the fact that I've done this enough, and there are fewer surprises now because I know my voice a little bit better, and I know my style a little bit better. But it's still a lot to learn when it comes to that kind of stuff. And I've just always tried to be as honest as I can in my music, and as conversational as possible in my music. And the good part about that is, you leave things like that up to the listener's interpretation. And I feel like that by doing that, there are songs that really, it gives them ownership. It lets them sort of absorb it without me having to tell them how to absorb it. I don't have to explain the story to them. I put the story in the song. I try to be as plain English as possible and get my point across. And, I approach things with, if I feel this way, I hope somebody else feels this way. And it usually translates. And those are the times when I get the messages like, man, this song meant the world to me. This song, it becomes a special thing to somebody. And, I mean, man, that's a whole lot more important than how many albums you sold. I do feel like that there's some influence that I've been able to accept, meaning I can accept the fact that I have influenced a generation of people that are behind me, and I can, because to be honest with you, that's kind of what I wanted to do. I mean, you kind of you get to a crossroads, or I did at least, where I said, okay, you can either have the adoration of masses of people, or you can have the respect of your peers, and you can have something to where you can do stuff that's a little bit more on the creative side of things, a little bit more on a little bit deeper, and may not necessarily be for mass market, but may mean more to to whoever it may be. And the cool thing is, I mean, that's kind of what I always wanted to do. I always wanted to be a writer's writer. I wanted to be. A friend of mine said, your favorite artist's favorite artist. I think that's a pretty cool. I'll wear that like a badge, man. I think that's a pretty cool way to look at it, and I'm proud to be able to say that if that's how people perceive me, then I'm happy to do that. It's taken some time, and it's taken some intentional effort to learn how to absorb those kind of compliments, because in your initial, I guess my initial instinct is always like, oh, shucks, thanks, let's move on. You know what I mean? Because I'm terrible at taking compliments. But I've learned over the years that people, they take the time out of their day to write this down or to put this in a message. And usually when people take that time, they give plenty of it. You know what I mean? Like they're honest and they're open about it, and you can tell that it matters. And so because of that, I've learned that there's a responsibility that I have to that. It's kind of a, I want to be a steward to the gifts that I'm given. You know what I mean? And if these songs mean that much to people, I want to be able to sort of feel that appreciation and to do it with, like I said, I think the difference is in doing it in a responsible way, understanding that that my gifts aren't anything that I've created on my own. God's given me what I got, and I have to be a good steward of that. The thing that I notice the most is the fact that a lot of artists have the guys that they go to, and maybe it's always been the case, but the cool thing is, it's cool to find people that can hear my music and go, I can do that. I mean, there's a guy named Reed Houghton that's doing real well right now, and I mean, I think stylistically, I think I could write songs for that guy for the rest of my life. Ella's another one of them, and and then Brent, Cobb is another guy like that. Just somebody that I have a musical relationship with. Jason Eady and I have a pretty great musical relationship, and so I think that it, the days of like writer and artist, I think thankfully, in my opinion, those lines are a little bit more blurred, because when I got started, there was a pretty significant line between the two. You're either going to be an artist or you're going to be a writer, and I never wanted to be. I never wanted to choose. I mean, there are seasons of my life, like right now, I'm really enjoying being a writer. This is the writing process is the most fun. It's the most rewarding challenge. It's the thing that I don't know. I get more out of it, and I put more into the writing process. And so as a writer, if I had to choose, that would be what I chose now. And I don't know that would be fair to my artistry. And so I never wanted to make a choice, and I don't feel like you have to these days, which is good. Which I never thought I'd see that.